The M14 rifle was a weapon designed in response to the massive firepower that could be wrought upon by the Soviets' AK-47. It also satisfied a desire by high-level U.S. commanders who wanted to replace the aging World War II-era weapons still in service by U.S. troops in the mid-1950s. The M14, though designed to be the standard infantry rifle for generations to come, was soon overshadowed by developments in the M16 rifle. Despite this, it still saw extensive combat use throughout the Vietnam War, but as U.S. troops would quickly find out, its unwieldy size and heavy outdated design would make it difficult to operate in the humid, dense jungles of Vietnam. However, even after its eventual replacement by the M16, the M14 was not forgotten. The rifle was still a favorite among some of the Vietnam War's top snipers, such as Carlos Hathcock and Chuck Mawhinney. In addition to being used by the Navy and Coast Guard riverine squadrons, Air Force security forces, and a reserve rifle with the Marines and Army whenever shortages of M16 rifles were felt. Additionally, variants of the rifle made a comeback in the 1990s because of their relatively long range and impressive stopping power. So, what was the secret behind the M14's long-lasting success, even though it had a relatively short career as the standard-issue weapon of the United States military? Let's find out. The M14 was first conceived of in 1958. At the time, the government owned the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts, where production of the rifle began. The original plan was for the M14 to take the place of several different firearms that were being utilized by the United States military. When the M14 was first proposed, the United States was using the M1 Garand, the 1903 Springfield, the M1 Carbine, the M3 submachine gun, the M1928 Thompson, and the M1918 Browning automatic rifle, also known as the BAR. The thought was that all these guns could be replaced by one versatile rifle that could switch between semi-automatic and automatic firing modes. By doing this, the United States could mass-produce the weapon and ramp up production in a way that was fast and cost-effective. Unfortunately, the manufacturing of the M14 was slow and tedious. In the end, there were many complaints from the soldiers who used it. The M14 used a gas-operated firing system that was based off the M1 and housed a cleaning kit in the butt of the gun just like its predecessor. The M14 was also designed so that an M2 bayonet or an M76 rifle grenade launcher attachment could be mounted on it. The M14 could also be equipped with the M2 bipod, which was an important key feature necessary to improve the accuracy of the gun. The M14 was able to switch between semi-automatic and automatic firing modes. This meant that the rifle was versatile and could be used in many different combat situations as long as it could be controlled. This was one of the reasons for making sure the rifle could be mounted with the M2 bipod. The M14 used the 7.62mm rounds that could also be armor-piercing or tracers. The magazine of the rifle could hold 20 rounds, and the gun fired around 750 rounds per minute on full auto. The rifle's muzzle velocity was 850 meters per second and had an effective range of 460 meters. This made the M14 one of the most accurate military rifles of the time at a distance, which is one of the reasons there was a resurgence of M14 variations in the 80s and 90s. The gun itself weighed around 10.7 pounds when loaded, and for soldiers who opted for the bipod, an extra 2 pounds was added. When it came off the production line, the M14 was state-of-the-art. It was designed to be able to fight in city warfare in Europe and the wild terrain of Russia. Unfortunately for the M14, but luckily for all of humanity, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union never escalated into a direct conflict between the two nations. Instead of finding themselves in cities and deciduous forests, the U.S. soldiers were deployed to the dense jungles of Vietnam, where long-distance and city fighting was rare. After 15 years of development and production, the M14 made its debut. It was the standard-issue rifle when Marines and soldiers made their combat debut in Vietnam in 1965 and would dominate the battlefield for the next several years. However, because Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara opted to make the M16 the standard infantry rifle of the United States, it began to be gradually phased out of frontline service, beginning with field test trials in 1967. By 1969, most M14 rifles had been replaced, and after 1970, they were rarely issued, save for the exceptions noted earlier. Due to delays and problems in production, the rollout of the M14 was slow. The first and only unit in the United States Army to be completely equipped with the M14 was the 101st Airborne Division in 1960. The Fleet Marine Force eventually switched from their standard-issue M1s to the M14s the following year. There were other problems with the M14 that eventually led to the halt of the gun's production in the 60s. Many of the issues with the earlier M14s had to do with quality control. The guns were being manufactured to be cost-effective at the expense of reliable parts. This led to components frequently jamming or breaking in the gun. The United States fixed several of the problems by giving the gun more resilient receivers and having stricter quality controls on bolts and hardware used to construct the rifles. The other problems did not have such an easy fix. The accuracy of the M14 was not great during automatic firing. The recoil was immense, causing the muzzle to move all over the place. The bipod helped, but even when set up properly, the M14 was extremely difficult to control when firing in an automatic mode. In fact, the recoil was so bad when firing an automatic that troops in the field had their own armorers make changes to the receiver to get the rifle to fire slower to make automatic fire more accurate and sustained. Later testing back in the United States showed that these modifications, though not as designed but necessary for combat operations, proved that they could slow the firing rate by about a third of what it had been designed for. There were also modified M14s developed during the war to serve as a squad's main automatic weapon for heavy firing. One example of this was the M14A1, but its firepower proved disappointing, and the military moved away from these designs for more reliable and powerful weapons. The M14 only served as the primary weapon for United States infantry for 7 years before it was replaced by assault rifles such as the M16. The M14 would have been perfect for a war fought in European cities or in Russia, but its large ammunition and uncontrollable automatic firing option was not optimal for the war in the Vietnam jungle. The M14 was just too long and unwieldy in the dense vegetation. Its weight also severely slowed soldiers down. The gun ran into more problems with the humidity of the jungle than anything else. The wood stock of the M14 expanded in the wet, humid jungle, causing the weapon to lose its accuracy and control when in fully automatic mode. Aiming the M14 in these conditions became next to impossible. Fiberglass stocks were eventually created for the M14, but at that point in the war it was too late since the gun was already being phased out of the United States' arsenal. Even though the M14 was almost completely replaced by the M16 during the Vietnam War, the United States military was still fond of the rifle and decided to keep a limited number in its inventory after the end of the war for future use in long-range marksmanship rifles. The basic M14 was modified to meet the needs of soldiers in combat situations outside of the jungle. Most of the variants were not utilized, but the evolution of the M14 over the years led to certain weapons that are still being used in combat today. Modification of the M14 began with the creation of the M15. This rifle never made it out of initial production, but it led to weapons that would eventually be used in combat. The initial differences between the two guns was that the M15s were equipped with a heavier barrel and a stock than the M14s. However, the military found that the M15 did not work any better than the original rifle and was therefore scrapped. The initial tests of the M15 did lead to a redesign of the M14, which included an improved selector switch, hinged butt plate, and a bipod to create a better version of the rifle. The next variation of the original M14 was the M14E2. This version of the gun was given a full pistol-gripped inline stock, and this was done to reduce recoil and make firing the weapon in automatic mode more manageable. It helped, but only slightly. The M14E2 also had a muzzle compensator and folding grip under the front stock. All these additions made the firing of the M14 on full automatic better, but it was still hard to control and overheated quickly. Plus, the limited magazine size of 20 rounds did not make it an efficient choice for a fully automatic support gun. As it became more and more clear that the M14 would not be the weapon of choice for the United States infantry soldiers, the military found ways to modify the gun for other purposes. An example of this was the M14 SMUD, which stands for Standoff Munition Disruption. The M14 model was used by soldiers specializing in the disposal of explosive ordnance. They would use the M14 SMUD to safely destroy unexploded mines and bombs from a distance. Basically, this gun was the standard issue M14, but with a scope on it. After the scope was mounted on the M14, more and more variations of the weapon started to be designed. The original concept for the gun was solid, and its larger bullets and longer range made it more versatile for combat situations outside of the Vietnamese jungle. Eventually, as technology got better, the design of the M14 was improved upon, and the components that made up the rifle were swapped for better state-of-the-art parts. This led to designs such as the Mark 14 Enhanced Battle Rifle. The Mark 14 was designed specifically for tactical missions. The rifle included an 18-inch barrel and retractable stock. This version of the M14 also had more rails for accessories to allow soldiers to customize their weapon. The M14 Tactical built on the upgraded Mark 14 EBM design. It used the same stock as its predecessor, but was equipped with a 22-inch barrel and a Smith Enterprise muzzle brake. The rifle was adopted by the U.S. Coast Guard, who found its range and firepower optimal for their operations. The M14 was continually modified, and parts of the gun were upgraded or incorporated into other weapons, most often sniper rifles. The M14 was an excellent starting point for the United States military to build off of. Powerful rifles such as the M39 Enhanced Marksman Rifle and the M89 SR Model 89 Sniper Rifle was designed through heavy modifying of the M14 in the 1980s. The AWC G2A, M21, and M25 sniper rifles were constructed in the 90s and 2000s using the M14 design as a base and modifying it into several different variants. Today, the M14 is still in use by the United States military. In fact, it can be found in all four main branches. It's mostly used for training and non-combat situations, but the M14 successors are sometimes used as sniper rifles in the field. The M14 is commonly seen in ceremonies conducted by the honor guards, color guards, and drill teams. Even though the rifle was retired as the standard issue weapon for the armed forces before it saw much combat, the M14 still had a solid design, which the military used for several decades. Now watch the evolution of the M16 rifle, or check out the top 10 best military rifles around the world.